This episode is brought to you by Amazon Business. How can you free up your team from time-consuming office tasks? Amazon Business empowers leaders to not only streamline purchasing, but better support their teams so they can focus on strategy and growth. Free up your teams and focus on your future. Learn more about the technology, insights, and support available at amazonbusiness.com.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good morning. This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my very good friend, colleague here at WABC, Curtis Sliwa. Curtis is the internationally famous founder of the Guardian Angels, as well as one of the most important talk show hosts in the entire country here at WABC. Our mutual friend, Jesse Garcia, the vice chair of the state Republican Party and the county chair of Suffolk, is out today, but he wants to wish all our listeners a very healthy and happy Thanksgiving with their families and friends. So, Curtis, let me begin with some breaking news. There's supposed to be a deal between Hamas and Israel with respect to a pause, a ceasefire, an exchange of hostages, brokered by Qatar. The United States was involved. I have my own thoughts about whether this is a good idea or a bad idea, and I'll give you my thoughts, then I want to get your comment.
Sure.
The problem with taking of hostages and bailing out hostages is you're awarding hostage-taking, which means there's a price on everybody's head. So when Biden decided to pay $5 or $6 billion for a half a dozen people or 5 people, he put a marker on the back of every American, no matter where they traveled, whether in Paris or London or Venice, whether they're in Asia or Europe or Canada. It didn't matter because the enemies of the United States knew you could grab an American and get something for it. And I'm not a fan of that. And I know historically the United States government's taken a position we don't negotiate with terrorists, and Israel's taken the same position. Frankly, that's more rhetoric than reality because they negotiate with terrorists all the time, and they do these hostage exchanges. So what they're talking about now in this first wave of hostage exchanges is 3 for 1. So they'll give up 50 folks that were kidnapped and brutalized by the Hamas terrorists, and they have to give back 150 Palestinians, and that's the deal. So I think, as a first take on it, it's a bad idea to do this. And it's easy for me to say because I don't have a loved one at stake and I'm not the hostage, but I don't think it's a very good way to run the world. Significantly for Israel, they're on a roll, literally and figuratively, in moving against Hamas and trying to eliminate their terror bases in Gaza and eliminate them as a force. And they've already said, the leaders of Hamas, that they'll keep coming back and back and back. They're very clear about that. And their charter, as you know, Curtis, is very, very clear. It's for the destruction of the state of Israel and extermination of the Israeli people. So if you give them time to regroup, to rearm, to hide themselves, to put more booby traps, I don't know that this is a very, very good thing. And this is coming, frankly, from pressure from the United States government. And so while Biden is out there on the formal public record saying he has Israel's back and he's there 110%, in reality, they've been putting on a pressure campaign. What say you?
Well, there's a history of hostage swapping in Israel. I remember when I was there after the Second Intifada, I was asking the Israelis, you know, recently you swapped 1,000 Palestinian prisoners from your jails for the body of a returned Israeli Defense Force fighter who was killed in one of those incursions into the Gaza. I couldn't even fathom it, but they were explaining, according to the religion, that everybody, every individual is so important and that you do everything you can to even get the remains of a dead person back, especially an IDF soldier. When you look at the pressure internally in Israel, they just finished a march from Tel Aviv to the home of the prime minister in which hundreds had joined. trying to pressure him to do whatever he could to get those hostages back. So he's facing internal pressure, which prior to this, there was now a unity government, whereas before that, everybody was at each other's throats. So I think he opted to say, I don't need that kind of division in Israel now. We've got Hamas where we want him. We got him trapped. We could well pause for 4 or 5 days and still track the terrorists. Plus, the people that he's giving up in return, according to the reports, are mostly women and children now. They themselves may have committed terrorist acts or have aided and abetted terrorist acts, because it's not that unusual for a woman to be a suicide bomber or a child to be a suicide bomber to try to take out an IDF soldier. So I would say he probably had to do what he had to do to not only calm the external pressures on him from the United States, but also internal pressures that still remain. Remember, even though the attack took place and everybody is joined together, there's not a lot of love for Bibi there. There is love for Israel, but not necessarily for its leader.
Well, remember one of the exchanges where they gave up 1,500 Palestinians, and a lot of them were terrorists, and they were grown men terrorists, for one soldier. And one of the leaders of this latest violation against Israel, this terror attack against Israel, one of the leaders was that one of the people was given back. So I'm deeply troubled by that. But let's talk about the momentum of this effort by Israel. They're going in now into the southern portion of Gaza. And from everything I've read, Curtis, this is one of the more difficult tasks they have. So far it's been successful, costly to them, but they've been very successful. There are hundreds and hundreds of miles of tunnels built under Gaza. So anybody who said that, Gaza is an occupied territory, they're right. It's occupied by Hamas, which has totally terrorized their own people, used them as human shields. It's taken the monies given to them, the equipment given to them, and when it wasn't enough, they took the sewer pipes and the water pipes, and they built rockets. But they have this complicated morass of tunnels going hundreds and hundreds of miles, all built for war. So the state of mind of Hamas, when they're totally free from Israeli occupation, it was their place. They could have made whatever they wanted to. They could have made it a wonderful paradise right there on the water. They could have been a trading partner with the world. Israel wanted to be left alone. Sharon, who is no wuss at all, a great general and a great prime minister, said, "It's yours. We will help you." Gave them all kinds of supplies, gave them all kinds of equipment, gave them all technology. First thing that Hamas did is knock everything down. And if you're an occupier and you're terrorizing the population, why are you giving them water and food and medical supplies and electricity and fuel oil? I just don't get it. The rhetoric, the narrative that they're an occupier is, to me, absolutely insane. But it belies the truth. But these people are not into the truth. They have their narrative. And I'm troubled that the momentum may be lost, and it may result in them rearming themselves, reallocating their resources, and the death of more Israeli soldiers. What say you?
Well, number one, it goes back to how did they get so many rockets to begin with, especially through a maze of security led by Shin Bet and the Mossad, Americans helping them, Egyptians helping them. Boy, they ended up firing thousands and thousands and thousands of rockets. So, number one, you have to say, where are they getting these materials? Because they don't come in all in one piece. It's piece by piece. They've been suggesting, well, maybe they're coming in by drones. The point being is, the benefit so far has been that Hezbollah has not got involved in the war. They're firing a few rockets. Israel fires rockets back at the Lebanon border. But remember, the big fear was, are they going to try to distract the Israelis by invading from the southern border of Lebanon? So far, all they do are they're exchanging rocket fire.
That's in a very contained space.
Right, but that's a positive because it doesn't mean Israel couldn't have handled it. But, boy, opening up a second front and maybe even a third front with Syria because you have so many armed militias there would have created even more pressure on the Israeli Defense Forces. So I think I'll entrust that they have pretty much cornered Hamas now. There's not many ways that they can get out of there. And with the Israeli security being woken up like we were after 9/11, I think they made a determination that we give them 5 days, we'll track them. And if they try to make a break, we'll take them out. But we're going to know who they are and where they go, including some of those that they trade for the hostages from Israel. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on this. I just think the whole world is watching here. Now, when Putin was leveling Aleppo, remember, he just leveled it. Women, children, anything. They have thousands were slaughtered. In the world, nobody cared. You didn't see people marching in the streets. We've seen other situations involving mass slaughter where there was no at all restraint on the part of the individuals going in and having mass casualties amongst the citizen population. But Israel is forced to operate on a different standard.
The double standard.
Because when they're right, they're wrong. And their enemies, which are many, are always going to continuously blame them instead of the people who started this, Hamas. Hamas declared war on Israel. They're the ruling government. They're also the largest terrorist group in Gaza, but there's also Islamic Jihad and the remaining elements of Fatah. So when people say, oh, Israel is the aggressor, they're the colonizer, they're not. As you pointed out, General Sharon, who was like Mr., a conservative, Likud, that's it, don't give him an inch. He gave him back the territory. There were all these nurseries that the Israelis had left behind where they would grow food. They destroyed all the nurseries right away. They wanted no remnants, no parts of anything that Israel had left behind. So they basically signaled that they were going to continue their jihad against Israel. It was a tactical mistake, but, they say, well, the people of Gaza, they're oppressed by Hamas. I'll bet you if you had an election there, all things considered, Hamas would be elected leaders again. So understand that a lot of the people's sentiments are with Hamas. They've been brought up, they've been brainwashed generation after generation. They want to kill the Jews. And we just have to be cognizant of that. If given the opportunity, they would.
The expression that they use, and you see these in the so-called peace marches, these pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas peace marches, they say from the river to the sea. From the river to the sea means one thing only, the destruction of the state of Israel as an entity and the extermination of the people residing in that state of Israel. That's what it means. And so when you have Tlaib saying, no, it's just inspirational, it's aspirational, just means we want our land. Now, the land they want is everything. And the mistake that people make, and this is a very big mistake, Curtis, you have to understand who your enemy is. As Golda Meir used to say, when people tell you they want to kill you, take them at their word. Believe them. If you read the political tracts and some of the religious scripture from the extreme Islamic fundamentalists, they really believe that they're entitled to dominate the world. And I mean the world. They have one view that their God is the only true God. Everybody else who doesn't adhere to the fate as they dictate you have to believe should be exterminated. So first up, it's going to be the Jews because they're there. But there's not a good track record about the way they treat the Christians. There's not a good track record the way they treat the Buddhists, the Hindus, or any other sect. Even amongst themselves, amongst the Muslim people, you have two groups fundamentally ripping each other's hearts out and cutting each other's throats. You have the Sunnis and the Sharia types. And those people have no tolerance for each other. But the Islamic Brotherhood was founded in the 1920s, 1930s in Egypt, and it's dedicated to the proposition that they will have world domination. Sharia law forced on everybody all across the world. And you see the impacts on Europe. Europe has given up the sovereignty and the cultural integrity by allowing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people from the Middle East who have no commitment at all to the values, the cultures, the laws of the host countries. What do you say about that?
You know, it's interesting. I've been in the middle of some of these demonstrations here in New York City. It's mostly college students, mostly whites, although obviously Arabic students are involved too. Occasionally you see some blacks and Hispanics, almost never Asians. And they have that chant, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. You know, it's a rhyme. They scream it out as they march along. And the few times I've had an opportunity to engage them in conversation, I said, well, what becomes of the Israelis, the Jews, the Bedouins, the Jews who live in the state of Israel now? If you're saying it's Palestine from the river to the sea, what becomes of them? And they look at me incredulously like they hadn't even thought about that. Are they going to be able to stay there? Will they have the right to stay like Arafat claimed when he was right on the cusp of the two-state solution of an agreement with the Oslo Accords? Oh, no, we have to have the right of return. Palestinians anywhere in the world should have the right of return, which was a deal breaker. They never explain it. So if you can't explain it, then I have to assume you want all the Jews out, you want to drive them into the Mediterranean Sea, or you're going to give them a few hours like occurred in Afghanistan where they can board flights at Ben Gurion Airport and maybe head to Boca Raton or other parts and get out of there. But nobody ever explains that. So when we say that's anti-Semitic, you want to drive the Jews into the sea, you would think the intellects in that community would say, no, you got it all wrong. Like sometimes they try to explain Intifada. Oh, no, you got it all wrong, Curtis. It's a spiritual cleansing in the Muslim faith. I said, that's not what Yasser Arafat meant when he was calling for an Intifada against the state of Israel.
Well, these are very dangerous times, and I don't see an easy and quick solution to this. They'll have the pause for 4 or 5 days, and then what? Are they going to dribble out and negotiate, get another 4 or 5 days for another 20 people, another 20 people? The fact of the matter is there was a ceasefire in place. They had their peace. They had 17,000 workers coming in on permits, working in Israel. They were probably intelligence sources in many instances for how they targeted particular communities because they knew what to attack. They knew where the police stations were, where the military bases were, where people lived. They knew exactly. They had the maps. They knew exactly what was going on. That was obviously an inside job. And it was coming from the people who were being allowed in. So they had peace. They had a ceasefire. All they had to do is live and let live. But they're not interested in living and let living. And so when the head of, when they set their 5-star luxury hotels in Qatar and eating all the best foods and sleeping with all the best women and drinking all the best champagne, Muslims notwithstanding, they're living a wonderful life while all these other Palestinians are suffering the price. They want to take over. So you have a pause now. They'll go back to the fighting until they're eliminated. And if you had a so-called non-aggression pact, that would work out as well as it did with Stalin and Hitler. As soon as Hitler made up his mind, he no longer needed Stalin, he went after Russia. It was his strategic mistake, but it was also his cunning and his calculus that he could do this. And that's exactly what Hamas is dedicated to. There will never be peace as long as people bottomed on this Islamic Brotherhood mentality. We have to take a break. This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend, esteemed colleague, the world-renowned political commentator, radio talk show host, Curtis Sliwa. We'll be back in a moment. Please stay with us.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Experience a progressive lens engineered with AI from Essilor, powered by individual measurements of your visual behavior. A lens personalized to you by an Essilor expert. Discover Verilux XR Track and enjoy instantly sharp vision in motion and seamless transitions from near to far. Find your local Essilor expert today at Essilor.com.
This episode is brought to you by Principles. Ray Dalio, legendary investor and New York Times best-selling author, wants to pass along his understanding of how countries go broke, because he believes the U.S. budget and debt situation needs to be addressed. To give you that knowledge, he has put the draft of his book, How Countries Go Broke, The Big Cycle, online for free. It's available now at economicprinciples.org.
Clorox Sentiva smells like grapefruit. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
Okay, we could be here all day. Try Clorox Sentiva for a trusted clean with long-lasting freshness. Also available in lavender and coconut. Use as directed.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We're back. This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is Curtis Sliwa, the world-renowned founder of the Guardian Angels, the great talk show host on WABC, my friend and colleague. So, Curtis, we've talked about the Iran influence last time you were on, but I want to talk about a larger question. We've talked today about the problem with Hamas and Israel, but what I want to focus on, to me, Iran is a manifestation of a policy built by Barack Obama and carried forward now in what I call Obama's third term, the hidden presidency of Barack Obama. That's what this is. Obama himself was a very big sympathizer of extreme left-wing philosophy, communism particularly. His roots, from his family roots to his educational roots, were connected to socialists and communists. And people should know that, as well as going in his early days to Muslim schools. So in many ways, his background is very troubling, and people didn't know about this when he was really running the first time out. I think the only person who really paid attention to it was Hannity on Fox, but the world didn't pay attention to it because he was charming, he was good-looking, he was glib, he was sophisticated. People liked him and made everybody feel good. So he was a feel-good candidate, and we could all pat ourselves in the back. We're going to have a black president for the first time. But he made a deal, and the following deal was this. Iran, you don't have to give up nuclear weapons. We'll just have it stalled for a while. At the end of the day, you'll be able to have your nuclear weapons. That's what the deal that Kerry negotiated. The money you're getting, there's no strings attached. You do what you want with it. And the leaders of Iran use it to feed terrorist organizations all throughout the Mideast. There were no real inspections because certain things were off base, including military bases where these nuclear weapons were being generated. So all this starts with Barack Obama and Kerry and this naive, if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, and if you want to think in the worst possible way, this sellout of Western civilization and American interest and Israeli interest. They hated Netanyahu because Netanyahu called them out that this is a bad deal. And our own Senator Chuck Schumer, himself a Jew, voted against it, but he never whipped against the bill that allowed for this, for the deal. And guess what? That should have been a treaty, Curtis. Should have been a treaty ratified by the U.S. Senate. It never was. They ignored that process. So Iran is now free to do what it wants. Now we get Biden coming in. And what is Joe Biden, in my opinion, when it comes to his foreign policy? I would call him the great appeaser. He wins a Neville Chamberlain Award. He's appeased China. He's appeased Iran. He's even appeased the radical progressive left. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when it comes to Iran, you have to say, look at the life and times of Barack Obama. When did he grow up? Went to the universities, Columbia. He went to Harvard. Who did he hang out with? You are very similar to the company that you keep. Not always, but you have some of those beliefs back then. because he's younger than I am, but he's pretty much in the same cycle. There was the ugly American syndrome. There were many periodicals, many books that were written about the ugly American effect on the world, especially to what they call oppressed peoples. Now, in the Muslim world, the oppressed peoples were always thought to be the Shias because they were the minority. And because Barack Obama had dealings with Muslim people, I think he identified with them. Now, there are a lot of Iranians who have great intellect also. I mean, you look at all the Persians who came over with the fall of the Shah, many of them Jews, and you say, wow, these are not third world people. These are brilliant intellects, great at business, great at culture. Well, yeah, because they came out of Iran at the time of the Shah. They weren't being oppressed. They were being oppressed politically, but they weren't being oppressed in all other ways. So I think immediately he identified with the Iranians. Now you say, how could you identify with the Ayatollah and the cult that has taken place since? When all the people you talk about that you're supposedly in favor, gays, lesbians, transgenders, women's rights, we can go right on down the line. They've had their rights just completely destroyed by the Ayatollahs. So you scratch your head and you say, is it because Barack Obama truly hated a lot of what America was in the 50s and 60s when they created that ugly American scenario, as it was when, remember, Mubarak was destabilized in Egypt, and there was the thought of, well, should we support the Muslim Brotherhood to go in there? And that's how President Zazi emerged, General Zazi. Said, you can't let the Muslim Brotherhood. Egypt is the cultural center, is the informational center for the Arabic-speaking Sunni world. So I think Barack Obama, ever since he became president and made his first visit to Egypt and spoke in that central mosque and basically apologized for the sins of America without talking about the greatness of America, he cast the die into the water that he was going to try to make amends for whatever problems America may have created with their policies. And I think he went about trying to do that, and he was stymied from time to time, but we're seeing that in the continuation of the Obama era through Joe Biden. Many of the same people who worked for Barack Obama now work for Joe Biden. And so I see the same policy attempts being made with Iran, even though Iran gives every suggestion. They're not going to change their ways. They're not reforming. They've had insurrection in their own country where people have been killed standing up to the Ayatollahs.
And we've never backed them. The United States never backed those.
We have an opportunity when Barack Obama was president. We've had an opportunity with Joe Biden. It's pretty much been left to the Israelis to keep an eye on Iranians' nuclear weapon development because they go in there through various insurgencies and covert operations to try to slow them down, take out their scientists, take out their weapon-making ability. But we know eventually they're going to have the weapon, and then the Sunnis are going to want a weapon, and it'll be a weapons race in the Middle East and Persian Gulf.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, with all the trouble that Iran has caused, and remember, all these wars that are going on now, these proxy wars, the proxies are controlled by Iran. So just imagine if they had nuclear weaponry, what they would be doing. They're undeterred because of Biden's weakness. You know, I read a very interesting article over the weekend in the Wall Street Journal from some professor. And the article is actually an interview and based on his writings, his teachings. And he said, you know, proxy war is actually an interesting thing. He said, from the United States point of view, it's always good to have other proxies not fighting in U.S. territory, fighting in Europe, fighting in Asia, fighting in the Middle East. That's a very, very good thing because you don't have it brought home to our country. And proxy wars serve to bring down the energy and the resources and the threat of your opponents. So let the proxies fight and keep us safe. That's the value of proxy war. It goes back to the Peloponnesian War. The great historian Thucydides, a great general himself, said proxies were the greatest thing since sliced bread. Not my words, not his. The answer is proxy wars are a great thing when you're the beneficiary of it. Right now, the beneficiary of the proxy war phenomena is Iran. So all these people are getting killed. Meanwhile, the Iranians are doing just fine.
No, there's no doubt. But I equate this to, and isn't it odd that this was a man who was universally chastised, even by Ronald Reagan. Menachem Begin was the prime minister of Israel. Through intelligence, he had learned that Saddam Hussein was developing a nuclear weapon outside of Baghdad. He sent in the Israeli Air Force, and they blew away that plan. Even Ronald Reagan got up and publicly condemned Menachem Begin, who then later on was to win the Nobel Peace Prize for sitting down with Anwar Sadat and negotiating a peace with Egypt that still lasts to this day. Who would have ever thought Menachem Begin, the warrior, no dove, a hawk, with the other hawk, Anwar Sadat, would come to terms with peace, all brought together by Jimmy Carter at that time, the Camp David Accord. But he went from being a heel to a hero. Now, why wasn't he a hero for taking out Saddam Hussein's nuclear weapons ability?
At the very beginning.
We knew that Saddam Hussein would use it. He probably would have used it against the Shias in Iran. Remember when he had that 8-year war of attrition?
Of course.
And we must allow Israel to do exactly the same thing with Iran now, because they are the looming threat to everything in the Middle East and everything in the Persian Gulf.
Let me tell you what troubles me about Biden, Obama, Kerry, that whole crew, with respect to Iran. As you and I sit here having this conversation together, you still have people inside the United States Department of State, United States Department of Defense, that are stooges, apologists, influencers for Iran. They've already shown that some of these people may have given up state secrets. For example, this guy Malley, where they took away his security clearance. He's under investigation by the FBI. Now, who's Malley? He's a guy who's been an Iranian sympathizer from the very, very beginning. His father was an advisor to the Ayatollahs. And he was the key person who's populated in the State Department. His fellow travelers, his people working with him who believed with him, and they're all pro-Iranian. And what was Malley famous for? He was famous for two things. One, he was the lead negotiator on the deal, the so-called Iran nuclear deal. And two, he's the guy who said what a great idea it is to give Iran all this money in exchange for hostages. And that's what was leading the State Department. In the Defense Department, you've had this woman there whose security clearance should have been lifted a long time ago, still sitting there working, another pro-Islamist, pro-Iranian source. I mean, what is wrong with us? Are we totally out of our minds, allowing our State Department, our Defense Department, the highest level of our government, which is dedicated, hopefully, to protecting us, turn over to Iranian sympathizers, fellow travelers? I mean, they know what they're doing. This is not incidental. This is not a coincidence. They know what they're doing. They're more than appeasers. You know, Biden is an appeaser by nature. He's not. I don't believe he's a traitor in this. But you have people there who are very, very questionable in terms of their loyalty to the United States. And then you have all the fellow travelers out there, all the people who are the apologists, all the academics who rationalize the violence and the terrorism, and they say it's just swell. The demonstrations, Curtis, were being organized. The pro-Hamas demonstrations were being organized worldwide. The next day after the slaughter in Israel, it was already in place. They pressed the button and the mobs came out. What say you?
Well, remember, most of the people who work in government, they've gone to prestigious universities, and they've been side by side with other students who are from the Middle East and the Persian Gulf, but they are of a different caliber than the people who are the leaders in the countries who are advocating jihad, worldwide domination in that. So they're figuring that, look, these folks weren't all that bad. You could sit down. You could have conversations with them. They were saying that as long as the United States continues to support Israel without any question, you're going to have problems in the Middle East and Persian Gulf. So I could see a lot of them saying, well, we're going to be stuck in this quagmire forever. Every 7 years, every 10 years, it's going to be a war of attrition. Israel will win, but then again, the other sides will want to mount up and want to come back and annihilate the state of Israel. So they're all trying to look for ways out of this instead of understanding that most of the people who are behind this didn't go to their schools, didn't have those kind of conversations. They are religious zealots. These people are not religious zealots because they have sampled Western culture, Western debate, or Western way of life. So they're part of the diplomatic corps. But the leaders themselves are oriented by religion, and that religion is what guides those countries. Those are not secular countries. Those are religious countries. And I don't exempt the Saudis because, again, that is a religious country. It may show some secular ability, but everything is based on the fact that Saudi Arabia is the guardian of Mecca and Medina and the sands of Saudi Arabia, which even the Shias must go to. So even their enemies must enter into Saudi Arabia. So you got to say, the people that you're talking to on an intellectual level in Western society are not the same people that are the shot callers in the Middle East and the Persian Gulf. I think they get very confused because they don't really have boots on the ground. And many of them just don't have the experiences that would let them know, no. These are people who are zealots. They have a belief that it's religion that will triumph over a political solution to any kind of a problem. And then if you're the state of Israel, where you are a secular country, then you have to defend your ability to survive by almost all means necessary because the forces of religion are trying to wipe you out, as has been the case in centuries. The Crusades were a perfect example. Every dozens of years, the Crusades would get together. The Vatican would get all the wealth and the men from France and England. They'd go in there to try to take over Jerusalem. They'd practice on the Jews, go in there and conduct some pogroms. They'd be battling with the Muslims. It was all about religion and ultimately real estate. And even so many centuries later, it's the same thing. It's all about religion. It's all about real estate.
This is Let the Record Show. I didn't know this was a real estate show, but thank you, Curtis. Let the Record Show with Curtis Sliwa, the renowned WABC talk show host and commentator, founder of the Guardian Angels. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Stay with us. We'll be back in a few more moments for more interesting conversation.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Commercial Insurance. Business owners, meet Progressive Insurance. They make it easy to get discounts on commercial auto insurance and find coverages to grow with your business. Quote in as little as 6 minutes at progressivecommercial.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company. Coverage provided and serviced by affiliated and third-party insurers. Discounts and coverage selections not available in all states or situations.
Nurses, are you tired of spending weeks or even months finding the perfect job that matches your specialty with your ideal shift and salary? LinkedIn has improved your job search experience. Search by specialty, the shift you want to work, and the salary you want to make. Go to linkedin.com/nurses and begin searching today. That's linkedin.com/nurses.
Note, side effects may include less time finding the perfect job, working a shift that you love with a salary that can take you to St. Thomas, Jamaica, and continuous smiling because of how simple this process was.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code listen50. T's and C's apply.
This episode is brought to you by Hulu, presenting Paradise. Paradise is Hulu's critically acclaimed addictive drama series, starring Sterling K. Brown, Julianne Nicholson, and James Marsden. The Daily Beast calls Paradise your next TV obsession, and the New York Times says it's exhilarating in all the right ways. Paradise is for your Emmy consideration in all categories, including Outstanding Drama Series. For more information, visit fyc.hulu.com. This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show. We're back with Curtis Sliwa, the renowned WABC talk show host. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. So, Curtis, I have this question for you. And I'm the House Democrat. And you know I'm the House Democrat.
Yep.
And I used to be a proud Democrat. But my party has been taken over by a radical left contingent. They call themselves progressives or Democratic socialists. And they are very dangerous, both in foreign policy issues as well as domestic policy issues. They have no real commitment to the democratic values of the constitutional system of the United States or the cultural values of this country. And I want to know when they're going to get their moral compass back, when they're going to get their common sense back. They're overwhelmingly supporting Hamas in its war of terror. What do you say?
Well, number one, having grown up in a Democratic household where there wasn't even tolerance for a Giuliani Democrat or a Reagan Democrat, it was Democrats always, because Democrats support working class people and the Republicans support the rich, which was very common when you grew up coming out of a Depression era when parents had to struggle to survive. So the perception was Democrats for the working class, Republicans for the rich. That's obviously no longer the case. In many instances, that's been flipped all over the place. But I notice that there's a very small minority of Democrats who are the socialists. And they were allowed in when the forces of Hillary wanted to show that she would have competition on her way to a coronation at the Democratic National Convention. They want to show, oh, yeah, there's really primaries and caucuses. So they let Bernie Sanders in, who has never been a Democrat.
Exactly.
Never.
They never should let him in. He has no right running in a presidential campaign as a Democrat.
Right.
He's not a Democrat.
He's a proud socialist. Now, imagine if you're Bernie Sanders, you say, wow, what an opportunity. They're going to let me in. It's like letting the fox in the chicken coop. For months, he went out to college campuses. He was attracting 5,000, 6,000. National media paid no attention because it was the coronation of Hillary Rodham Clinton. And then all of a sudden, he had rallies of 30,000, 40,000 people, mostly young people. Young people like to be on the avant-garde. They like to be contrarians. They don't want to follow in the footsteps of their mothers and fathers. They're rebellious. This is a perfect opportunity to join the DSA. You're still a Democrat, but you're really a socialist. I've oftentimes said, imagine if you said you can be only one, AOC. You could either be a Democrat or you could be a socialist. 9 out of 10 of them would say, I choose to be a socialist. I'm really not a Democrat. So they're in the Democratic Party, but they're not the majority by any means.
But they've subverted the Democratic Party.
True. But the Republicans make it worse. Our colleague, Mark Levin, puts out a book, All Democrats Are Evil. Now, you have guaranteed that a moderate Democrat is not going to want to have anything to do with a Republican when you spew that kind of nonsense. I know moderate Democrats. They have so much in common with moderate Republicans.
Of course.
And so you find those issues that you agree on and disagree on the other issues, and you work for the common good. Now, we can help them rid themselves of the socialist influence. But if we're going to demonize the Democrats, guess what? That's the majority of the population and the majority of women. And women vote. Men talk a lot of nonsense, but they don't vote at the same levels as women. So keep demonizing the Democrats, and they're going to keep winning elections because they have more in common with moderate Republicans than they do with their own socialists in their party.
What do you make of an Oscar-winning actress named Susan Sarandon going out there and backing Hamas and proudly doing that? I was shocked. I've always followed her career. I always thought she was a great actress. I've always found her to be a very compelling character in whatever role she played. And I'm just shocked. Why is it that the Hollywood left? I understand there's been indoctrination with respect to academia and even with respect to media, Curtis. But what's the attraction to the Hollywood people? You know, for every John Voight, there's 100 Susan Sarandons.
Right, but with Susan Sarandon, remember, how is that any different than what we saw of Jane Fonda in the middle of the Vietnam War, actually giving aid and comfort to our enemies, the North Vietnamese, visiting them, looking up at the Yak-Yak guns as if she was shooting down John McCain herself. At that time on college campuses, they knew that the Viet Cong would come into a village in South Vietnam. They would find who the chief, who the head was, and kill them in front of all the other villages. They didn't have a problem with that. So we're not talking about change through democracy, through an election process, but rather change by basically supporting the black Jamid Viet Cong, who would come in and assassinate leaders, and then by brute force all the village people to follow their dictates, or it was off with their heads. So you scratch your head and say, why would you be supporting them? But then again, our country didn't offer any resolutions to the problem either. I remember it's the anniversary of the assassination of JFK. Well, JFK and the CIA assassinated the president of South Vietnam because he was trying to convert Buddhists to the Roman Catholic faith. And they said that will cause an insurrection. It might have, but you don't assassinate a sitting president and then declare that we stand for democracy and choice. And so we have so many demons ourselves in terms of our foreign policy. But having grown up in that Vietnam War era, I would actually question others. I would say the black pajama-clad Viet Cong proudly say they go into a village, find the village chief, and assassinate them. So it's a form of terrorism. You either do as we say or it's off with your head. And the college kids had no problem with that, some actors and actresses. So I see Susan Sarandon as following in the footsteps of Jane Fonda. Her agency just let her go. Guaranteed she'll do better than she could have in the latter part of her career. Oh, she'll be considered, she's a martyr. She sacrificed her acting career. Oh, she'll be doing speaking engagements. She'll be the belle of the ball. She'll be just like Jane Fonda was.
Pretty scary stuff. Well, we're taking a break. This is Let the Record Show with Curtis Sliwa, the internationally regarded leader of the Guardian Angels, the founder of that great organization, as well as major talk show host on WABC here in New York, with a worldwide presence of 173 countries, by the way, and Curtis is at the top of that group. We'll be back in a moment with the final segment of Let the Record Show.
Are we still on the trail? Is this pack getting heavier? More switchbacks? Why am I doing this?
At REI Co-op, we believe there are places within ourselves.
Just a little further. You got this.
That we find only outside.
Wow. Look at the stars. This is incredible.
We have the gear, inspiration, and advice to help you get there. REI Co-op. Visit rei.com.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC, licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org, number 3030.
My favorite thing about Shipt since I signed up for Target Circle 360? No price markups when I order same-day delivery from tons of local stores. Only a handful of alcohol retailers and items don't count. I won't lie, I've had too much fun being like, markups on groceries? Not in my fridge. Markups on pet food? Not for my DOG. Markups on tools, electronics, home goods, meds? Not in my house. Anyway, it's awesome. Order now at shipt.com/360. Terms apply.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show. We're back for our fourth and final segment of today's show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is Curtis Sliwa, the founder of the Guardian Angels and world-renowned radio commentator, talk show host. So, Curtis, the last time I read something or saw something on television or listened to our station, the number was 66 attacks against military bases in the Mideast by Iranian proxies against the United States. And they just responded again by hitting some ridiculous empty building or some storage unit. Meanwhile, our guys, in excess of 60 so far that I've read about, have suffered traumatic brain injuries, which may last these poor souls the rest of their lives. Their lives may never be the same. And we haven't responded. Not one body of any of these proxies who are controlled by Iran has been carried out. No direct strikes against Iran or its oil fields or bases. They could do something against Iran to send the messages is totally unacceptable. Yet they keep talking about giving them more money. And Biden, once again, has eased the sanctions against them. What say you?
Well, remember, their excuse for giving them the money is that that's really money that was frozen in foreign banks upon the takeover by the Ayatollah Khomeini, after the Shah had left, and then the imposition of his form of Sharia law, the Shiite manner. They froze all their assets. This is really their money, and it's the only way we're ever going to get them back on board with it, dealing with us, and not trying to put their full efforts in developing nuclear weapons. Well, number one, if you were them, why wouldn't you want to develop a nuclear weapon? You saw what happened to Muammar Gaddafi.
Didn't work out well for him.
Well, he was convinced by Bush 43, give up your nuclear weapons.
And what about the Ukrainians?
Of course, Ukraine also. South Africa, de Klerk gave up nuclear weapons. When I have guardian angels in Cape Town, I actually visited the area, which is like a wildlife safari now, where they had the silos, where they had the nuclear weapons. De Klerk gave it up because he recognized the country was in transition, soon to be run by Nelson Mandela. He didn't trust the majority population to manage the nuclear weapons, so he decided, I'm going to eliminate them. Now, that's foolish. I mean, they'd be able to manage their nuclear payload. But I think the Iranians know that you get respect if you have a nuclear weapon. Look at Pakistan. You got all those crazies over there sitting on like 70 nuclear weapons. So their whole focus is going to be to get a nuclear weapon. That's why, as I said earlier in the program, our focus has to be to take out that capacity. They cannot be trusted with nuclear weapons. And Israel, first and foremost, knows they would be number one target. So when I was in Israel on the bus, going through the Negev desert down to Eilat, spending time in Aqaba in Jordan, where I met Prime Minister Tony Blair, who was retired. That's where he's retired. And on the other side, Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. And then you can see the tip of Saudi Arabia in the Red Sea, all from Eilat. They would tell you it's a chocolate factory out there. I said, is it kosher? Is it Nestle? Said, oh, it's a chocolate factory. No, that's where all the nuclear weapons are. And I'll never forget Ben-Gurion had a very fiery meeting with JFK. JFK visited him in his very humble home that I visited out there near the Negev Desert. And he said, you lied to me. You have nuclear weapons. You embarrassed me. And he said, Mr. President, you're damn right we got nuclear weapons because we can't trust anybody in the world. Never again. We're going to make sure that we're defended by all means necessary. And that was brilliant because JFK, obviously, nobody would have given their complete support to the state of Israel in the many times that it was attacked and threatened by its enemies. So I think it all goes around Israel must take out that nuclear weapons capacity. They've been doing a good job at slowing down their development, but every nickel, diamond, penny that Iran has is going into that to get the nuclear bomb, because then all of a sudden they'll get a respect like they don't have now.
Well, but that you can do other things. You impose sanctions, and you can take out their capacity to produce oil and destroy their economy, take their economy down. I mean, 66 attacks against us, and we're hitting sheds.
Well, again, there are two figures who tried to develop a nuclear weapon, and Israel took out their ability to do so. Saddam Hussein outside of Baghdad, and outside of Damascus, Bashir Assad, the son of the butcher of Baghdad, if you remember, Hafez Assad. He was developing a nuclear weapon. The Israeli Air Force went in there, leveled the place. You never heard anything about it, no complaints. So I think, sure, you could impose sanctions. They're going to figure out a way to smuggle out the oil like Russia is now with all the sanctions on them. So just go in and take it out. Take out their capacity to build a bomb. Because once they have one bomb, they are a player, unlike their status that they have now with all their proxy armies around the world.
Let's focus on another problem we have. And we see coming attractions because it's happening in Europe. You have this unmitigated disaster of immigration from the Middle Eastern countries. No commitment to the culture, to the laws, to the rules of the host countries. They come in by the hundreds of thousands because of the European Union. One of the reasons you had England dropping out of that game, because they realized that it was becoming a third world country controlled by Islamists. And Spain has that problem. Italy has that problem. France has that problem. England has that problem. And we're going to have that problem too, because we're not checking who's coming in here. When you allow people who have no commitment to the laws, the culture, the rules of the society that's supposed to be the host, you have a dangerous fifth column in your own backyard. What say you?
Well, I've been alerting people that it's not the typical suspects, from Iran or Jordan or anywhere else in the Middle East or Persian Gulf. The most active cells of Al-Qaeda and ISIS are in the sub-Saharan North African desert. The countries, Mauritania, where, believe it or not, they still have 10% of their population enslaved by the Arabs, who enslave 10% of the black population. Mali, a country is just in constant flux. Chad, Senegal, the Sudan, and they're coming in this wave of illegal aliens that we've seen. Now, they are Muslims. They speak French. They speak Arabic. They have not assimilated. The Venezuelans, who are 40% of those coming across, they assimilate quick. Because like half the population speaks Spanish. And remember, they were brought up in the Western Hemisphere. So I would say we are allowing our enemy into our backyard, and the enemy may not look like the previous terrorists of the attack of the World Trade Center in 93 or even in 9/11. They are going to be from the sub-Saharan northern districts of Africa where there are active Al-Qaeda and ISIS cells. It costs them $18,000 apiece to get to Mexico City.
Where's that money come from?
Well, that's the question that I ask. There's no way they're going to get a job in those countries and save that kind of money. I think many of the leaders there also want to get rid of those young men because they don't want them to join an insurrectional group, contribute to the civil war. They're all of military age, where in some instances there's mandatory conscription. So those young people want to get out of there. So out of 100 young people, if you have 5 dedicated jihadists and they meet up in a mosque here because they want to go to a house of worship, and then they meet others who believe in jihad, that's a recipe for a third attack. And they want to clean the table on a third attack. And they're not going to do it at the Thanksgiving Day parade. They have said they want to hit where they think the most Jews operate and live. For them, it's always been Wall Street, the World Trade Center. Ramzi Youssef, when he was captured in the Philippines, after hatching the plan for 9/11, to actually, that's right, we'll take over airplanes and crash them into the World Trade Center. When he was captured by the FBI and flown over the World Trade Center, and they asked him, why'd you do it here? We wanted to kill the most Jews. Well, why not go to a neighborhood of Jews? Nah, we know the Jews control Wall Street, the World Trade Center, and most of the people working in the World Trade Center were Jews, which is nonsense. But that's the reason they keep fixating on the World Trade Center, and they're going to try again. That's a guarantee they're going to try again, and we're making it easy for them, especially by not allowing ICE to do their work in our area. If we're the number one target for terrorism, we all acknowledge that. Why wouldn't you allow the federal law enforcement agency that was started in 2003 in the aftermath of the attacks to root out the terrorism to do their job? What? Our NYPD counterterrorism group, which has been depleted with the loss of personnel in the ranks, we're going to depend on them solely? No, we can't. We need an active group that is working in tandem with ICE to make us safer than we are at this point.
Curtis, I want to thank you. It's been another great show with you. It's always a pleasure being in the same room with you, whether we're talking on the show or just talking in the halls here. You're an absolutely brilliant commentator on the history, political science, government, moral compasses, world events. It's always a delight being with you, and I want to thank you very much for being on Let the Record Show this week. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg signing off, and look forward to being with you again next week. Thank you.